Welcome to the Danny Clinkscale Reasonably Irreverent podcast. Insightful and witty commentary, probing interviews, and detours from the beaten path.
Welcome to Kansas City Profiles presented by Easton Roofing. Every Friday we have fantastic stories to tell, and certainly one of the most fantastic is the one we're about to tell or have told to us, because that's what we do here, as Billy Brimblecom Jr. is a drummer in the Kansas City area, has been for a long time, has been in many, many Kansas City bands, has worked in Nashville as well. But he also has the story of having to overcome serious trauma in 2005 when he lost his leg to cancer. It would require amputation, but his friends rallied around him and raised enough money for a prosthetic leg. But a few years later, Billy decided to help out others as much as he had been helped out himself, becoming the executive director of Steps of Faith. He now devotes himself to helping other amputees acquire prosthetic limbs. It takes money to do that. He raises money, and of course you've probably heard about his friendship with Jason Sudeikis, which led to Thunder Gong, the biggest fundraiser that Steps of Faith has, a variety show with Billy Brimblecom as part of the band, as a matter of fact. He tells a remarkable story of a musical life that started very, very early, becoming a drummer, operating in many bands, becoming a great part of the Kansas City music scene, moving to Nashville, and a whole lot more. It's a fantastic and inspirational story, and he is a inspirational storyteller. And we'll get to it next as Kansas City Profiles brings you Billy Brimblecom and Steps of Faith.
More of Danny's Reasonably Irreverent podcast after this.
I'm here with Joe Spiker, owner of Easton Roofing, and boy, we had to negotiate a million things in 2020, but Easton Roofing navigated them all. As 2021 rolls out, what should we expect this coming storm season?
Well, Danny, it'll be the same thing as it is every year. You know, the storms come, and you've got the guys out knocking on doors offering quote-unquote free inspections. Be wary as a homeowner. If somebody's knocking on your door, they probably need the work, and if they need the work that bad, they may be willing to do something untoward to get it. So if somebody knocks on your door, says they want to give you a free inspection, just tell them have a great day and give us a call. We'll come out for free and give you a good, honest opinion as to whether or not you need to do anything at all with your roof.
And what's the best way to get in touch with Easton Roofing?
You can always find us online at eastonroofing.com or give us a call at 913-257-5426.
Easton Roofing. Integrity matters. I'm here with David Schmidt from Private Capital. And David, tell us more about your outstanding firm.
Thanks, Danny. Here at Private Capital, we focus on return on asset. In today's world, it is survival of the fittest. We look at things from all angles and try to figure out what works best for you. The changes we will see this next year on assets will be monumental. The key to success is knowledge. Know where you want to go, and we'll be here along the way. To find out more, give us a call at 816-221-7775.
David Schmidt from Private Capital with the best service for you. It's time now to get some great assistance on healthcare with Chad Beisel from no-nonsense-healthcareninja.com. And Chad, even your business's name would indicate that you have a real aggressive way and an important way to go after some health insurance for your clients.
What I've found out in the industry is just a lot of people are really confused. They don't know what plans are good, what their plans offer, how they cover. And so I've just taken the approach of being really educated on what options are available to clients and showing them all the options that are available and making sure they understand them so they can pick and choose what options are good for them.
And one thing that's really important, of course, is access to doctors and hospitals.
Absolutely. That's become a big issue for a lot of people. Some of the plans out there are going to restrict those clients to where they can and cannot go. So if you live just outside the Kansas City metro, some of the counties outside, you may not be able to go to some of the hospitals up here in the Kansas City area. So making sure that you have a plan that's got doctors and hospitals and places you want to go is really, really important today.
Learn more by visiting no-nonsense-healthcareninja.com and let Chad help you. I'm here with Tim Emerson, the owner of Emerson & Company. And Tim, give us an idea of the range of services that you provide from Emerson & Company.
At Emerson & Company, we do credit card processing, payroll services. We do bookkeeping, merchant accounts like point-of-sale systems.
What would you say differentiates you from other companies in the field, and what makes you special?
I think what makes us unique is that we're a small local business making regional decisions on companies. We create a profile for the business and then put it out to our different vendors in a very competitive environment and tailor those needs to the specific business, which usually ends up in a great fit or great result for the company.
And, of course, the idea is to save money, right?
Save money, and actually sometimes I'm surprised where actually a solution that may cost a little bit more ultimately does save money, but we're not conditioned to think like that sometimes.
Emerson and Company. Check them out at emerson-co.com or call them at 816-360-9092.
If you'd like to join these and other great sponsors and market your business to a growing and engaged audience, contact us at danny@dannyclinkscale.com. Look forward to hearing from you.
Billy, you're a native Kansas Cityan. What are your first memories of being Little Billy?
Wow, first memories of being Little Billy. I think maybe my first memory is I can remember being so little that I was getting a bath in the kitchen sink at my grandparents' house. So that's like little. And then then the memories after that, that I think then maybe it skips a year or two, but I think that's my actual first memory: the bath in the sink in the grandparents' kitchen in Shawnee, and I spent a lot of time at my grandparents' house growing up. My parents were divorced when I was really young, but I was around my parents all the time too, of course. So yeah. That's the first one, and just kind of growing up, loving music from an early age. Just was like really being obsessed with the radio as a kid, and then got into playing music, when I was around 10 or 11. Yeah.
What was the way that your childhood shook out? You said you spent a lot of time at your grandparents' house. Your parents were divorced. Did you live with your mom? Did you live with your dad? Did they share? What was it like for you? And did you have siblings also?
Yeah, no siblings. Siblings came later. I have my dad has other kids, and and I had step siblings and whatnot. But I grew up an only child, and yeah, my parents got divorced when I was 3, and then they got remarried, actually, and then re-divorced. So they really tried. But yeah, they were divorced when I was 3 and 5. And yeah, I lived with my mom, and then I saw my dad, like every other weekend, and then,
right,
random times and whatnot. And so yeah, I think I spent a lot of time at my grandparents' house mainly because my parents were so young. They were just like doing the things you do when you are young, and you just have more of a social life, and or they were working or whatever. But yeah, that was kind of how the living situation shook out, and yeah, grew up only child, and then my dad had my parents were remarried and whatnot. My dad had his next child when I was 11, I remember.
Okay.
So that was a big deal. Yeah.
And that was about the time you were getting involved in music. You got drums, I think, drum set when you were in the 6th grade. Your mom also was a bit musical, and guitar and piano, and was always singing. And so it kind of came naturally, right?
Yes. Yeah. I wanted to play the saxophone in 5th grade. So when I was like 9 or 10, and then they make you play the clarinet, and they made me play the clarinet. So I did that for a bit. And then over the summer between 5th and 6th grade, we had a new band director coming in. And I decided I wanted to play the drums. And so instead of, which is what I was supposed to have done, which was even as a 6th grader, start with the 5th grade beginning band in 5th grade. 6th grade was advanced band, using quote fingers. I just showed up with the 6th graders with the new band director with a snare drum, and he very quickly realized that I had never played that instrument before. But yeah, my mom was always singing. She didn't play an instrument. But my grandma did. My grandma could play. They had piano in their house, and my grandma could play guitar, and she was a singer. And then my uncle was a singer, and he led a band that would play. And then my dad could play the drums, somewhat. And so there was definitely a little bit of the music in the DNA, for sure. But yeah, drums started in 6th grade when I was 11.
How did you feel like you had some aptitude right away, or did you really have to work at it, or did people tell you, hey, you're pretty good at this?
I don't remember when I was either told or felt like I was good at it. It didn't come. It's weird. It's an interesting question, because I know that I have natural ability. I can look back, 30 plus years later now. But originally it was like, oh, I have no idea. It was
right.
Like the rough start. I had no idea what I was doing. I just knew I loved music, and I was really attracted to the drums. And even when I got the first drum set, like you said, Christmas, 6th grade, my dad got it for me out of an ad in the paper. I think it was $220, and it was a 1967 Ludwig drum set that I would, do a boxing exhibition match to get that drum set back, but that'll never happen.
Right.
It's long gone. But I played it incorrectly. He even showed me. We had Christmas with my dad's side of the family at my grandma's house on Christmas Eve. I got the drum set, and then we took it home to my mom's house where I lived, and he kind of gave me like a lesson, but I was playing it incorrectly. Like I was playing, instead of the bass drum, I was playing by ear, and so I was using the floor tom. And anyway, once I kind of figured that out, like over a year later, and him like, no, you're doing it wrong. It's this. I was like, oh, and then it started to kind of flow. So I was probably doing it for a year before it really started to like come together. But I guess, I was, even if I was doing it wrong, I was playing beats and I was like performing technically at like the talent show within 6 months. So I'm thinking out loud here, but yeah, so I guess it did come pretty naturally, and I have a very fast ear too, which I think is like even which is maybe like my biggest musical talent, even more so than like quote unquote being a good drummer. I just have a really fast ear and understand the drums enough to be able to learn a song and kind of emulate really quickly from a young age. So, yeah.
When did you get the feeling that this was going to be something that would be sort of your life's work?
Well, I remember in 8th grade, I wasn't a natural athlete by any means. And also didn't, right around the time where I realized, okay, if I want to like be any good at basketball at all, and I loved basketball, but and this is the height of Michael Jordan's powers and all that.
Right.
So, it was easy to be obsessed with basketball. I realized, I could go down the street to the court and practice basketball, or I could stay in my warm bedroom and play the drums to my, Van Halen, Guns N' Roses, and Def Leppard tapes. And so that's what I wanted to do. And in 8th grade, not being an athlete, you're kind of cool, kind of not cool if you, I was like, felt like a dork because I wasn't good at sports. But then I started being recognized. I started having some opportunities to play the drum set in some band concerts in 8th grade. And then that was kind of the birth of like, oh, well, I had this thing that I could do that no one else in my school did. So it was kind of this singular superpower that, for better or for worse, was kind of the birth of some confidence and some ego at that time as a young kid. And so shortly thereafter, by the time I was in high school, it was like, even starting high school, it's like that was all I wanted to do, was just play drums. It's all I wanted to be known for. It was all I wanted to, I just lived it and breathed it. So by the time I was 14 or 15, I was like, well, this is what I'm going to do with my life. Yeah.
And obviously you're going to start playing in bands. And when did that start up, when you were playing in actual other kind of bands and not, school bands and symphonic bands and things like that?
Yeah. I mean, kind of immediately. It started even before I had a drum set, technically. I had just my snare drum, my stepdad's snare drum, and my friend Trent Ehlert, who's a great friend to this day, he started playing guitar a few years before I started playing the drums. And so he and I even had like jam sessions in his mom's basement where he would be on guitar and I would just be on the snare drum. So when I got the drum set Christmas in 6th grade, I remember the first person I called was him. And so, hey, I got the drum set, So yeah, we had a little band that really a few months after I got the drum set did a performance for our music class, and we played a Def Leppard song, just 2 guitars and drum set, no vocals, no bass, and not using the bass drum. So I could only imagine what that sounded like. And then that spring we played at our talent show, and then played, I think a Guns N' Roses song or something. So he and I had bands, different versions of kind of that band, starting in 6th grade through middle school, even into high school. And so we didn't perform a lot at that point, especially into high school, but we were playing, we were practicing, and we would practice in my basement. And there were shows that would happen occasionally. And then, really when I was 16, I was in jazz band at that point also in high school. And so, I remember at jazz camp the summer, I don't remember, 93, maybe summer after my sophomore year, I got this scholarship to go to this KU jazz camp, and then met my friend Mason Fan there, who was a really good bass player. And then later that summer, he asked me to join his band, and they were all Olathe kids. I was a Shawnee Mission kid. And then that was the first band I was in that was playing all original music. So, that was a lot of fun. And then we started playing like all ages clubs and stuff. So I was playing started playing shows that were outside of like parties or talent shows and things like that, and started playing clubs when I was 16.
What was the name of that band?
That band was called Aristotle John.
Nice.
Which is a very silly name, and was a very silly band, and kind of classic for the time high school band. Not a ska band, but the band had a horn section just because these are your musician friends that you're in school band with, right? And so they were an existing band and were getting rid of their drummer, and then they brought me in, and that was a real eye-opening experience. Like I said, it was the first band playing all original songs and playing these clubs and playing, grown-up places where we would show up, and then they would go, "Oh, you got to leave after you're done playing. You're kids," and the only reason they would let us even play once they realized we were all underage is because, typically my dad was with us. That kind of let us stay at the clubs, but yeah, that was Aristotle John, and that band did some, we did some fun things. So.
And of course you've played in band after band after band after band. You did go to college. You were a marching Jayhawk, as I see in some of the research I've done.
Mm-hmm.
How did you stay the course in college, or what was your KU experience like?
Oh no, yeah,
I didn't think so.
Yeah, no, I mean, what happened was, I did all the, like you had said, I did all the bands, marching band, symphonic band, all that stuff, jazz band in high school, and especially around the time I turned 16, 17, I really I played in jazz band at the suggestion of my first drum teacher when I was 14, who had just graduated from Shawnee Mission North, and I knew about him because I wanted to go to North, and he was the big guy. Sage Eaton was his name. He was an early drumming hero. He was like, "You got to do jazz band because it's the only way you can play drum set at school." I recently had lunch with my high school band director, Penny Sneed, who I love, and was able to retell her this story. And, it came naturally to me, all those kinds of things, but it wasn't until I had a student teacher, a guy named Lindsey Williams, who worked under Penny, who gave me a cassette tape when I was, I think, 17, maybe, I can't remember. And it was an Art Blakey cassette. And that was the first time where I had heard, like I loved Van Halen, Guns N' Roses, Def Leppard, later Led Zeppelin, Pearl Jam, all of these things that a kid would like, in the late 80s, early 90s. And so I applied those things to the drums, to rock and roll drumming. Well, in jazz band, I just kind of did whatever, and but I didn't really have like jazz influences for a couple years. And then when I got this Art Blakey tape, all of a sudden I was like, oh my gosh, I wanted to do that. It was the first time I had heard jazz music that really excited me and that I really wanted to try to emulate. And that just totally opened my eyes. So to answer your question, then I was like, I'm going to KU and I'm going to have a career as a jazz musician. I mean, I was obsessed, and that led to Tony Williams and Miles Davis and all of these things. And I had a very, very small jazz scholarship to KU, but small, but scholarship nonetheless. I loved marching band in high school, ended up hating marching band in college, mainly because our instructor was a jerk. Nobody liked him. I'm sure he's in better shape now. And I was just obsessed with the drum set and jazz. That's really all I wanted to do. And then, but then at semester of my freshman year in college, the guy I mentioned earlier, Mason Fan, who I had met in Lawrence at KU Jazz Camp, and that got me in that band Aristotle John in 93 or whatever. This is like December of 95. In a crazy twist of events, Mason had auditioned for and joined the band Stick, which was a really big band in Lawrence and was one of the many bands from Kansas City and Lawrence that kind of in the wave of grunge had been signed to a major label record deal. And so Stick had been signed to Arista. When Mason joined, they'd been recently dropped from Arista. And anyway, long story short, then shortly thereafter, as you can now see, because the band was falling apart, but I didn't see that at the time, the bass player left, Mason joined, and then the drummer left. And then I auditioned and joined the band. And so then that was like a dream come true at the time for both of us. Aristotle John had played an open mic night that turned into a video shoot for Stick, for a video that did end up on MTV. And we ended up in the video stage diving, which was crazy. And then 2 years later, we ended up in the band, and which was just a really bizarre twist of events. And that really kind of, in a small way, but really in a big way, if I look back at my life, really kind of changed my life at the time. I mean, it was a sinking ship, the band was falling apart, but, these guys were 10 years older than me and Mason. And then I met really all of the people I would play with probably for the next 10 years, and they were a big band. I was 18 when I joined, and and I joined one of the biggest bands in town. So it really kind of sets a trajectory for my music career, even though that band only lasted another year. But it really kind of set the course for me.
So when did you decide that college wasn't for you, that just being in a band was?
Yeah, I stuck it out another semester, but my focus was really on being kind of a loud rock and roller, more than just consuming jazz 24/7. I mean, I still did it, and did still love it, but I just was so consumed by joining Stick and us trying to take over the world and all of these things that did not happen. So I didn't really pay a whole lot of attention and barely went to class unless it involved having a pair of drumsticks in my hand, unfortunately. I don't have a lot of regrets in life, but that was one of them. I should have gone to class more, and I also should have stayed in school at least another year just to play jazz, because Stick didn't really tour. I thought we were going to,
right.
We did some regional weekends and stuff like that, but that was about it. So, yeah.
So what happened subsequent to Stick? This set the course, but what happened after that went away?
Well, the night I auditioned for the band, the guitar player, the band practiced at the guitar player's house, Mike Tobin, and Mike's roommate was a guy named Christopher Toll. And the night I auditioned, Chris was there because he lived there, and one of his best friends, J.D. Warnock, was there, just hanging out with him. And I met those guys, and then they would just be there a lot when I would go over there for band practice, and we became friends. And basically the singer of Stick, Mark Smurl, moved to Chicago in like the last few months of the band. But then also in that time, a couple things happened. Chris Toll had a band called Action Man, which was really cool. Where he was a singer and the songwriter and guitar player of that band, and that band was kind of falling apart. And then Stick had kind of one last cool opportunity in that we played our last show actually was 2 days before Christmas, and it was a showcase for Atlantic Records. It went better than we thought. Sometimes when you play a concert, you think it's going terribly because you're in your head, and it actually went great. We thought it went terribly. So the next day, I called Chris Toll and said, I think Stick just played our last show. Your band's broken up. Why don't we get together and play? And so that was the beginning of the Creature Comforts, which was, a rock and roll kind of rootsy power pop band that Chris and I started. And then that was kind of similar to Aristotle John, really, where it was like that became a true band of brothers and so many firsts in that band. And that was my first band to really do like a national tour. Those guys are brothers to this day. We have a text thread that we're on together every couple weeks, sending old pictures and jokes and stuff like that. All of those guys. And J.D. Warnock, I mentioned by name because he joined that band as well. That was Christopher Toll, J.D. Warnock, and Brian Everard. And so that was like 97 to 2002 that band was together, and that was pretty much my life.
A couple of years later, obviously, a gigantic change came in your life, and when you're diagnosed with cancer, which would eventually cost you your leg. Where were you musically at that point in time? You're a young man. First of all, I have to ask always: were you able to just be a musician through this point in time, at this period of your life, as far as making a living is concerned?
No. No. I had, fortunately, I always had jobs that were, retail jobs and later on restaurant jobs that would allow me to leave town for 3 or 4 weeks at a time to go on the road and make little to no money, trying to carve out my artistic place in pop culture. So, there have been periods in my life where I made a living as a musician later, for sure. But, right. But in those days, like Stick, the Creature Comforts, no, we always had jobs. We had to work. But yeah, to answer your question about, when I got sick and lost my leg, that was 2005. So right. Creature Comforts split up in 2002. There was about a year of kind of being a bartender and kind of just playing with local bands. Be Non was one of those bands, BE/NON, with my friend Brody Rush, who's a great friend to this day. Jeff Harshbarger was in that band. He was a friend of mine from college, a brother of mine, and incredible musician and man around town in Kansas City. He was brilliant. And So yeah, that was but then I joined this band from summer of 2003 called The Start, which was a band from Los Angeles. I was kind of recruited into that band by a friend of mine named Eric Sanger, who was the bass player who lived in Austin, Texas. He and I joined the band, and that was about a year of my life. 2003 to summer of 2004, we did some great things, went to Europe and, made a record at Sunset Sound in Los Angeles and toured with the Offspring and did all sorts of great things. Sold out the Troubadour in LA, lot of fun things. I was really unhappy for a lot of reasons in that band. Wasn't their fault. And I'd been having pain in my left ankle for a long time, off and on, since a car accident in 1999, actually. And it got really, really bad in the last 6 months of being in that band. I left the band for a lot of reasons, not just because my leg hurt. Came home back to Kansas City, ended up connecting with Jim Suptic. We started Blackpool Lights together, and Jim was and now is again in the Get Up Kids. The Get Up Kids were kind of coming to a close, and the Get Up and Blackpool Lights was essentially, Jim's kind of solo band, but it was very much a collaboration and a band of brothers. And the original lineup of that band was J.D. Warnock and Brian Everard from the Creature Comforts and me. Jim and I started the band together, and I brought those guys in, and we made a record. I've made a lot of records, and it's my favorite, that record. But so the band started, and then at the beginning of 2005, I finally went to check out this pain that was getting worse and worse in my ankle. Again, I'd had it looked at once before, but Blackpool Lights played our first show, and then a week after we played our first show, I found out I had cancer. So that's long answer to a short question. That's what I was doing musically at the time. Is I had this brand new band, and because of Jim's history with the Get Up Kids, we had plans to go to Japan. We knew we were going to have a record out. We had a whole kind of schedule we had lined up, which we really ended up only altering slightly, thankfully, once we found out I had cancer. But yeah, that was obviously an enormous change in my life.
What were the circumstances of you losing your leg? Obviously, when you have cancer, it's not always going to be that severe. Was it just had it just gone on too long? Was it a case where if you hadn't had the pain from the car accident, maybe you never would have found out? What were some of the circumstances surrounding your cancer?
Yeah, well, you're definitely right. If I hadn't had the pain, I would have never found out. I mean, it was not cancer starting in 1999. We know that.
Right.
There was some sort of, like, that car accident it was, on K10, jaws of life were used. I mean, I'm not trying to be over dramatic. It was crazy. I crushed a couple of vertebrae in my back. It was terrifying. Very much, the insurance adjuster, when my dad went to get my stuff out of my truck, said, "Sorry for your loss," at the car lot.
Right.
And he was like, "No, he made it." And the guy was shocked,
Right.
So I was really lucky that I wasn't paralyzed. And anyway, but whatever was happening in my leg, whatever undiagnosed trauma that really didn't start hurting until the following summer, so like 6 months later or whatever, just got worse and worse, and cancer set up shop there. So to answer your question is that was definitely the alarm of, like, I got to get this looked at. And we'd always thought it was nerve damage. Even medical professionals thought that. I went and got the orthopedist that treated me after the car accident in Lawrence, I had I think maybe an x-ray. And he was like, "It's fine." I don't remember what year that was, but it was a couple years after the accident. And, but finally I went to, I started seeing an acupuncturist who I still see to this day, who I love, Shelton Kleitz, and, to try to help with this pain. And he's been a huge help in my life, and my wife's life. But yeah, no, the neurologist said, yeah, he did all these tests. He's like, "This is not a neurological issue. Have you had a scan of this leg?" And I was like, "Yeah, I had a scan. It's fine." And he's like, "Well, let's do that again." So, test. There was a mass in there. And to answer your question about why it needing to go to the extreme of, my leg being amputated, was because before the final test, I met with a new orthopedist, Dr. Howard Rosenthal, who saved my life, along with my oncologist, Dr. Mark Myron. I'm just plugging everybody, plugging my bandmates, plugging all my medical
That's
team.
Right.
But it's a Kansas City show, right? So Dr. Rosenthal was going to do a surgical biopsy where they would go in and take part of this mass out to see what it was. And he went through all of the things that it could be based on the test that I'd had thus far. And if it was this, and what we would need to do if it was any of those things, right? If it's this, then we don't need to do anything. If it's this, we need to do this. He said, if it is a sarcoma, which is there's lots of different kinds of sarcomas. They're all big, bad, scary, deadly, potentially deadly tumors. If it is a sarcoma, we have to remove the sarcoma and everything that it is touching. Well, it was like the size of a large apple in my ankle, and I didn't have a big ankle. So I said, and he said, so the only reason you would lose your leg would be to save your life. So it wasn't for sure to me or him that I would need to lose my leg, but really, long story short, that's what it came to. In order to get clear margins, and that was about halfway through the process. I started the chemo and everything in February or March of 2005, and that summer, it was lots of tests, keeping an eye on how I was reacting to the chemo. In order to get clear margins, meaning in order to get rid of your cancer and do everything we can to make sure it doesn't come back, this is what we got to do. And I will say I've heard many stories of people that have had sarcomas in limbs that have, I could have said no. I wasn't made to do that surgery, but I've heard many people that have said no, and the cancer has come back, typically in their lungs,
right,
and it kills them. So I just knew that I now know, looking back, that I had a feeling, I kind of knew it was going to happen, even though I was deathly afraid of it happening, and it was the worst nightmare. But yeah.
And so you had to get a prosthetic. I know at first maybe you were in the hospital and people came and visited you, and it was kind of a sort of a party atmosphere. But eventually you're going to have to go through the grieving process of losing your leg. How difficult was it?
Yeah, I mean, you nailed it. Yes, the worst time of my life is actually a kind of a beautiful memory, and that I was just surrounded by so many people every day and every night in my hospital room for a week. And yeah, then eventually I went home, and there was some grieving in the hospital, but definitely when I got home, and I started to say my friend, she is my friend, but who was Dr. Rosenthal's nurse still, Kim Haynes, who's an angel, and a friend to this day, and her husband are big supporters of our organization. But she said, you need to grieve the loss of your leg like you've lost a loved one, which seemed crazy at the time, but really it's right. I mean, it's a part of you, and a necessary part of you in a lot of ways. So yeah, I mean, it took a lot. That kind of stuff is I've realized I'm just impatient, but I also kind of have this, what do we got to do to get through this kind of resiliency thing? And so I understand that's good, that kind of survivor mentality, but also it's like, I realize that I tend to rush through negative emotions. This is a pretty new realization in my life. And so, I don't like melancholy. Some people like to be sad. There's a comfort in that with them. I am not one of those people. And so, yeah, it took some time. It took months. I mean, I really, in retrospect, it was pretty fast, but just because, not all of kind of my positive mental attitude is it wasn't suppressing the negative emotions. It just was like, I just prefer that, but I feel like I was able to process it. But yeah, it was, it took time, and it was terrible and hard, and it's still weird and sad to think about it, because it's an awful thing that I would have never chosen,
right?
Even though it, changed my life for the better, but yeah, it took some time. But I mean, I lost my leg August 4th, 2005, and I was, healed a little slower due to chemo. Now I know, with so many amputee stories, I actually healed quite quickly, because other than the cancer and the chemo and all of those terrible things, otherwise I was a really healthy, young 28-year-old guy. And so, I was learning to walk by the end of October of that year.
More of Danny's Reasonably Irreverent podcast after this.
It's time to visit once again with Dr. Brad Woodall of Advanced Sports and Family Chiropractic and Acupuncture. And Dr. Brad, your group has reached a significant milestone in receiving a prestigious award.
Danny, we've been honored for the 10th year in a row to receive the 5-Star Service Award from Integrity Doctors. And what this means is that all of our offices throughout Kansas City have made sure to give people excellent chiropractic and acupuncture care, be on time, and do a very complete and thorough job, and have great responses back from patients.
I know firsthand because I was just treated, for instance, today by you. You have a wide range of fantastic services.
Absolutely. Chiropractic, acupuncture, physiotherapies, rehab, anything that you need to keep you well in bones, muscles, joints, and nerves.
And I can't say how much it's benefited me in the time I've coming here, upwards of 2 years. My back has improved 100%. And you can have that same kind of treatment too. For more information and your chance for a healthier way of life, visit asfca.com/Danny today.
Right now, it's more important than ever to support local businesses, and 23rd Street Brewery in Lawrence is open and ready to take care of you. Make 23rd Street Brewery part of your KU game day experience, whether you watch the game there or grab curbside pickup for your tailgates or watch parties.
But not just game days, 23rd Street Brewery is great any day of the week, and when the weather's nice, you can take advantage of their heaters on the patio. 23rd Street Brewery is open daily from 11:30 to 9 for dine-in, carry-out, curbside pickup, and can even help with your catering needs.
So support local and visit a Lawrence favorite, 23rd Street Brewery.
Cinematic Visions has been an affordable solution for professional media production in Kansas City since 2003, offering award-winning video production and creation, as well as a wide array of digital and social media management services. From planning, scripting, filming, editing, and post-production, to delivering your product to a watching world, Cinematic Visions will provide professional and affordable services for you and your business with the necessary return on investment to make it all worthwhile. Cinematic Vision's goal is to unlock the power of storytelling through video and a strong online presence for your company. Beyond the numbers, they want to inspire and evoke your clients to feel and act. Let my friends at Cinematic Visions embed your brand where it belongs, in your customers' minds. You can find them online at cinematicvisions.com or with a quick phone call at 816-600-6300. Firsthand, I have enjoyed the benefits of the CBD products from Canaway. My back feels better and better these days, as a major part of my routine are the pain-relieving salve and the pure gold oil. And recently I had the pleasure of a treatment session using the Canaway CBD in conjunction with the Microlight 830 cold laser. The non-invasive treatment session worked wonders, and I could barely tell I was even being touched. TML 830 is the first 3B cold laser to get FDA approval, and in addition, the combination treatment with CBD is patent pending. The new smart laser is the only hands-free cold laser in the world and is used by athletic trainers, chiropractors, MDs, physical therapists, and veterinarians everywhere. You can learn more about all the great benefits from the complete line of Canaway CBD products by contacting my friend Sherry McCants at 515-208-6312. That's 515-208-6312 to get outstanding information about Canaway. If you'd like to join these and other great sponsors and market your business to a growing and engaged audience, contact us at Danny@DannyKlinkScale.com. Look forward to hearing from you. Our guest is Billy Brimblecom, and of course he is a fantastic local musician and drummer and the originator of Steps of Faith, which has turned into a fabulous organization that helps out musicians who are in a similar situation to what he was just describing in obtaining prosthetics, which are incredibly expensive things. And we've talked about it many times on our music podcast with Tim Finn. How quickly were you able to return to music, and what were the challenges? I know at first you played without a prosthetic and then eventually with one. It sounds, the way it's described, as it's almost seamless, but clearly it wasn't.
It went pretty fast, but it wasn't seamless. Yeah, I mean, I had a drum set. I was living in an apartment on the plaza, and I had a drum set up in my apartment with these things called sound off pads, which does what they're called. Does what they think you would do. You can hit the drums, and they make a very, very, very quiet sound that you couldn't hear outside the apartment. So I was able to kind of keep playing, which I pretty much did every day, which, definitely helped. I realize now that even from like last year when we were locked in our house, just going downstairs in my basement and playing drums, even for 5 or 10 minutes, really like changes my mood. I mean, it really is like a natural drug that like changes the chemicals, switches around the chemistry in my body, and it was like a mood enhancer, it's really a beautiful thing. So I think that was really helpful in the recovery. But no, I was asked to play at my church before I had a prosthetic leg, still going through chemo. And, you need all 4 of your limbs to play drums, and I didn't really know how that was going to work, but I figured out a way to make it happen. And it's kind of nerdy and technical and hard to explain. And then for any drummers listening, it involved a drop clutch on the hi-hat and pushing the hi-hat pedal down with a stick to open or close it. But it worked out. One church service, had everybody helped me load all my gear. But when I got the prosthetic leg, though, then I was, then it was kind of off to the races. My drumming was together way, way before the walking was together. Fortunately, you sit down to play the drums. So it wasn't seamless, but it was darn near pretty close. I mean, that, thank God, came together relatively quickly. Blackpool Lights had begun touring right around the time I lost my leg, with my blessing, with a substitute drummer to kind of start to set up our record. And we'd made our record during chemo before I lost my leg. That's all on your streaming services, friends. Blackpool Lights, This Town's Disaster. came out in 2006. I stand by it to this day. It holds up. Listened to it recently. It's a good rock and roll record. But yeah, I mean, we were, I finished chemo. Well, Blackpool Lights, we played we'd always play on Thanksgiving, and 2005, I was about to finish up chemo, and we did a thing where I'd rehearsed with the band, and the band played the show with our substitute drummer, Aaron Coker, and then for the last song, he kind of, as a girl I was flirting with at the time said, who became my girlfriend, who became my wife, the torch was passed back to its rightful owner. And I got up on Christmas in Thanksgiving at Record Bar and played the last song of the show. And I mean, I barely made it through. I was so weak from all the chemo. But yeah, then after that, I was rehearsing with the band. And at Christmas, I mentioned my friend Brody Rush and Jeff Harshbarger. We played and this almost about killed me too, but it was sure fun. We played a Led Zeppelin tribute show at Record Bar, and that was kind of like my first show back. My last round of chemo was a few weeks before that. My first date with my wife was the first weekend in December of 2005, and then the following week was my last round of chemo, and then a couple weeks later we played that Zeppelin tribute show at Record Bar. And then Blackpool Lights was on the road in March of 2006, and I could still barely walk, but I had a prosthetic leg. I was cancer-free. Hair started growing back. My bandmates helped me with all my gear, and, we were playing rock and roll all over the country.
That's a pretty amazing story and a pretty amazing turn of life to get through that whole process and then return to what you're doing and meet the person who you would share your life with. I mean, that's a big ball of stuff right there in 2005.
Big ball of stuff, man. 95, we talked about a lot of stuff that happened in 95, a lot of stuff that changed my life in 95, not just college and joining Stick that we didn't even cover, but foreshadowing, since I think we're going to get to this, one of the things that happened in 95, what I'm trying to say is 95 and 2005 were incredibly pivotal years in my life. But one of the things that also happened in 95 is in high school, I auditioned. I thought I was going for a job interview to be a server, to serve pizza. But my one of my theater teachers, I realized it was then an audition to be in the improv company at a improv comedy theater in the River Market at the time, called Comedy Sports. And I auditioned and I got in and met some of my best friends to this day still doing that. And one of those guys was Jason Sudeikis, and we'll probably get to that. But yeah, so 95 was a year of immense change, and 2005 was a year of even more immense change, to say the least.
You also have spent time in Nashville. What was that period of your life like?
Yeah, my wife and I got married in 2007, and then Blackpool Lights. I left Blackpool Lights for a period of time in 2007, and more of the things I kind of wanted to do musically were with artists based in Nashville. And so it was actually my wife's idea. She was like, what if we moved to Nashville? Yeah, so we did. We moved there July 4th, 2009. And yeah, it was just a whole new thing, which proved to be very difficult, but very beautiful. I didn't move to Nashville as a 22-year-old. I was 32 at that point. And, my wife was a teacher, and she was also a singer and had not pursued music professionally to the extent I had, but is every bit as good or whatever as I was or am as a singer as I am as a drummer. But yeah, so no, I just kind of tried to make my way. I had a couple friends there. I had a couple friends from here that I've been working with a lot that moved there the same summer, and most notably my friend Don Schaffer, who's a very brilliant man. He's a songwriter and a composer and a playwright and a composer of musicals and all sorts of amazing artistic adventures. And we went on many of those together. But yeah, I just started trying to make my way there and playing at church and making friends and playing with Don and trying to work in the recording studio, and met other artists, most of them through Don, and was touring and that kind of thing. And that all was going slowly but surely pretty well right up till my wife got pregnant, which was a miraculous blessing in 2012. In 2012, I was just working all over the place, and the year kind of ended with working for 6 weeks in New York City with Don on one of his musicals that got a off-Broadway showcase run. Unfortunately, the week we were supposed to open was Hurricane Sandy in the New York area, so that kind of put a damper in our opening week, but we still persevered. Pretty crazy time. Then the beginning of 2013, our first child was born 6 weeks early, which was a shocking, traumatic surprise. He was fine then and is fine now, thank God. But so I then was like immediately kind of like, okay, I'd already been kind of had this kind of feeling like there was just more I was supposed to be doing other than just playing music,
right.
And I didn't know what. And I had that feeling for a long time. And I really felt, especially in Nashville, kind of at the mercy, I'm kind of a self-starter kind of dude, not to pat myself on the back, but just like, I want to create the opportunity for fun so that then I can be a part of the fun. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I don't need to run the show, but it's like, well, I'll do it, and then the spotlight doesn't need to be on me. I just want to be on the team, And so in Nashville, I just was at the mercy of an artist friend deciding to hire me to play on their record or do their tour or whatever.
Right.
And those things happened, and I did a lot of cool things. But, my pastor at the time was like, it's kind of against your nature. He was like, you just kind of have to sit around waiting for other people. He's like, I just wish you kind of had your own thing. And I said, I do too. And so, And so I started looking for a new job at the beginning of 2013. And then the phone wasn't ringing. We had this new baby. People weren't touring. It was January. And Nashville kind of pretty quiet around that time of year. I didn't want to leave to go on the road. I didn't want to leave to go be in the recording studio. I didn't want to leave. It was hard enough leaving my wife. I didn't want to leave this new, beautiful baby boy. Really, weird twist of events. At the time at the prosthetic clinic, I had an appointment, and a couple conversations happened that ultimately changed my life, and led to really what I'm doing now.
And what you're doing now in a great part is Steps of Faith. And you mentioned those conversations, and how did it lead from one thing to another with 2013 becoming another very important year?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So what happened was I had an appointment one day. I was in this season of, kind of looking for a new career or whatever. And my prosthetist, that's the very hard word to say and spell, that is basically the prosthetic doctor, the clinician, said, hey, on your way out, I have this new patient who I'm fitting. It's my first appointment with him. He lost his leg to cancer. Will you go in and just talk to him for a minute? I think it would be helpful for him with you kind of on the other side of this, walking around being good to go. I got very excited and said, I feel like that's part of why this happened to me, and I don't get to have conversations with amputees very often. I would love that. And I went in, I talked to the guy for maybe 5 minutes, and I could just see the hope in his eyes, and left there just really kind of praising God that I was able to speak that language. Having empathy is very important, and boy, do we need that these days, just in general. But being able to go, I can only imagine what you're going through, is one thing. And being able to say, I know what you're going through, and I know I can tell you it's going to get better, is a whole other thing. And that's harder to find with something like losing a limb,
Right.
And so I went home and told my wife how I was just so excited. And I talked to other amputees before, but something about that conversation was just really special. And I told her, I said, I wish that could be my job. And I had a follow-up appointment the next day. And I told my prosthetist that. He said, oh, thanks for talking to that guy. I said, hey, man, I got to tell you. And I told my wife I wish that could be my job. And he said, well, maybe it could be. And I said, I just kind of laughed. Shortly thereafter, he introduced me to the guy his boss, who owned the prosthetic clinic, a guy named Rob Pittman. And, we had a conversation about quote unquote working together, and I didn't really know what that meant. And I was like, okay, yeah. And then like a month later, we had another meeting, and I said, I've thought a lot about this, and I don't really know what I can do for you. Like, I'm a musician, I don't know, like, I wear a prosthetic leg, but I don't know anything about this. And I don't know what you have in mind, but I just know how I felt talking to that guy and being the kind of bridge to hope and comfort. And I said, I can't think of anything I'd rather do than that. So I don't know what that tells you. And he said, okay, well, I got it. I established a 501c3 nonprofit 4 years ago that has been sitting dormant because I don't have time to run it. It's a big job. It's a hard thing. And what if you do it? And so that's the day that I say all the time, it's like he tossed me the keys to a car with no engine in it and said, see what you can do with that. And so those are the conversations that led to my life changing. And Rob is one of the many people that changed my life in a really profound way. And the longer this goes on, the longer I'm in this job, and the more I appreciate him, and what he did for me, which is really like, the guy didn't know me at all. It was really like throwing stuff at the wall. And but the Lord works in mysterious ways, and I had no idea what I was doing, and I was way less qualified than I even thought at the time. I was an amputee. I'd had fundraiser happen for me. I'd raised money for other people for other things. And thought like, oh, I got this, and I did not have it, but then also I did. And so anyway, that was Steps of Faith Foundation. Again, he had established a 501c3 4 years prior. Basically the year I moved to Nashville, he had established his 501c3 to help amputees that had no health insurance and no other way to pay for a prosthetic limb. People would come into his clinic. They would need his help. They were hardworking people that just needed to get back on their feet but had no health insurance. Our health, quote unquote, care system in this country has been a mess for a long time. And that is true no matter who you have ever voted for or who you will vote for next time around. If there's one thing we can agree on is maybe not how to fix health insurance, but is that it's a mess. And so he just wanted to help these people. So that's really what Steps of Faith does. So that day really changed my life. And here we are.
And of course, what a lot of people have become familiar with, and maybe more familiar with you through, is Thunder Gong. And of course, that has just gone explosively and helped the Steps of Faith organization. Just talk a little bit about that and how it's really exploded since 2017 as a very important fundraiser for you.
Yeah. I say this all the time, that moving back to Kansas City from Nashville was one of the best decisions I've ever made, personally and professionally. And, we moved here in 2016, moved back here. We had 2 kids at that point, and we never loved Nashville. We loved a lot of people there and things about it, and our lives changed for the better, but we just missed Kansas City. And with Rob's blessing and the blessing of everybody else in my board of directors, we moved back here and started to try to find our footing. And I had these ideas to do, some things with Sudeikis and that would be musical and comedic in nature as a fundraiser for years. And I'd asked him every year to try to do something, and we'd try to do some things in Nashville that never really came together. And sure enough, the beginning of 2017, I started really kind of trying to like, hey, I want to have a serious conversation with you about us trying to do an event. And I had done this event at Christmas in 2016 at Kansas Hall, where I had put together my silly yacht rock band that has been around for a million years, Summer Breeze. We kind of created an extended Summer Breeze family and put together this Elton John tribute show, which was a ton of fun and really hard to put together, a lot of work to put together, I guess I should say. Really hard because Elton John's music is, even though it's written on the hearts of most people, over the age of 30 in all over the world. It is incredibly difficult music to recreate accurately. But I say this because we put this show together as a fundraiser for Steps of Faith, and it was, mildly successful. It raised what felt like a modest success to us at the time, maybe $12,000. We were just talking about this yesterday. But what we did is we had this big, huge band, and then I had all of these guest singers on every song. Some of the singers were people that were in the house band, my wife being one of those people. That guy, J.D. Warnock, I mentioned, one of those people who's in Summer Breeze with me. But then all these guest singers, just notable musicians from around town who are old friends and very talented. And it was 2 days before Christmas, and I just was kind of in the glow. It was just beautiful. I just love this huge production of making music with all of these people. And and so then I thought, well, what if we did this thing? And I had this idea to do something like that with Sudeikis. It was going to be like a house band, but a bunch of guest drummers. But I thought, well, if Jason's involved, we could maybe get like Dave Grohl, just like straight to the top. Like, he's more than just a guest drummer. I was dreaming big right away. And anyway, it took most of the year of Jason and I, me being back in Kansas City. So then having the opportunity to be with Jason in person more, because he would be home visiting or he was here doing Big Slick. We had a really serious conversation about it in the spring, and then we had a really serious conversation about it right after Big Slick. Yes, that's how it was born, man. Just kind of like there was a lot that went into it. The DNA of it was doing a concert and comedy show that Sudeikis and a bunch of friends put together for me in 2006 when I needed to raise a bunch of money. That was in my head. The Elton John thing was in my head. And we started talking about it. And then he called the Foo Fighters, and we based it around them the first year. That's why it was on a Sunday. It was going to be a day off for Foo Fighters where they had to pass through Kansas City. As you know, since you know a lot about my story, they did not do it. Fortunately, we did not announce them, but it was literally based around their schedule the first year. And we put together this crazy variety show, and that became Thunder Gong. And even without the Foo Fighters being there, it was an enormous success and like a dang dream come true for me personally and for Steps of Faith. And, 3 or 4 years later, still doing it.
Still doing it, and it is a tremendous success as well. And it seems like you have taken, your organization's called Steps of Faith, but your life seems to have gone in important steps that have happened every so often. What do you think the next step might be?
Yeah, I agree with that statement. And when Rob and I met, the only things that were in place for Steps of Faith was the 501c3 status, and of course, along with it, the mission to do what it is we do, and the name. Rob did all of those things. I turned it into a business, so to speak, right? A nonprofit is still a business.
Right.
It's just when you give us your money, we're helping people walk and giving them their mobility with all 4 of their limbs again. So it very much has all been Steps of Faith. And yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot lately, with it being a new year, and especially a new year after such a crazy year we all experienced last year, and we're still kind of experiencing. So I don't really know. I mean, I guess I would say, just like when I was in that period where I talked to my pastor and he said, I wish you had your own thing. And I felt like there was more for me. By the way, spoiler, the thing became Steps of Faith, for sure. And Thunder Gong and all of the beautiful things I get to do with this organization and the people we get to help and the fun we get to have with Thunder Gong and the ways we raise money. But I'm in a period where I feel like that again, where there's more than just this. And I say just this with Steps of Faith, and that's a very big thing. I mean, we helped 166 people last year, and we're a really tiny organization. So I'm very proud of that, and that's people all over the country. So I think it's a twofold thing, Danny. I think for Steps of Faith, we're looking at what our goals are for this year, and we have a board meeting here coming up to determine that, and how many people we're going to help, and how much money we hope to raise. The goal with Steps of Faith is to build this organization to where it can exist, survive, and thrive without me. Now, I ain't leaving the job anytime soon if I have anything to do with it. But I want this thing to outlive me is the point. And so, because like I said, health insurance is a mess, and people aren't stopping losing limbs, unfortunately. So the need for what we do continues to exist, and will for a very, very long time. But I kind of I want to do more, kind of under the umbrella that I've been given here with Steps of Faith. I want to do more to help amputees. I want to do more to, I think, normalize disability. I feel like I live a very ordinary life that at just now 44 years old is really just getting started. And I think that I very, very rarely feel like a disabled person, even though technically I am. So I just kind of want to do more in this time, thankfully, in this time where equality is a much overdue buzzword, and a thing that we're all looking to do, and make the world a better place, if you will, and with equal rights all across the board. Obviously, we have a long way to go in all areas, but in particular in the form of the disabled community. So I just really want to do more to kind of shine a light on it's not inspiration porn, as people say, at all. The strings don't come in here in this part of the movie. This is just, I am a normal guy who's had a terrible thing happen to me, who I do all the same things I've always done to then do this different thing, to use the terrible thing that happened to me to help other people. So I want to keep doing that beyond what Steps of Faith is doing, and just kind of shine a light on other people who have had terrible things happen to them, or were born with a quote-unquote disability, that also are living very ordinary lives. Yes, we're extraordinary, but we're all extraordinary in one way or another, right? So it's really just kind of shining a light on normalizing, like removing stigmas and like, oh my gosh, of people that have quote-unquote disabilities. Does that make sense?
It does indeed make sense, and you sound like you're in a very great place for yourself, and it's been a pleasure to listen to all this, and much good luck to you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me. Thank you very much.
This podcast was made possible by our great sponsors like Easton Roofing, the presenting sponsor of Kansas City Profiles at the Danny Kling Scale Reasonably Irreverent podcast. Easton Roofing, where integrity matters. We hope you enjoyed the latest Danny Kling Scale Reasonably Irreverent podcast. Come back soon for something fresh and new.